Alright then, what is going on guys and girls? Welcome back to the Golfmagic channel and welcome back to an equipment review video. You guys may be a bit bored of all the drivers that have come out in the last few weeks, but we've covered all of those. So today we're going to cover the brand new Callaway Apex iron range. Callaway have released 5 new irons in this product range, and we've got 4 of them here today. So we've got the Callaway Apex, Apex DCB, Apex Pro and Apex MB. The one that we're missing is the Apex TCB, and we're going to review that very soon, so keep your eyes peeled. What I'm going to do today is talk to you guys about each individual iron range, the technology that they've put behind it, and which ones could be right for your game. I feel like Callaway have done really well here by producing an iron that could be used by any type of handicap golfer, and there's endless possibilities by combo sets that you guys can do with all these irons. So without further ado, let's talk about the Callaway Apex irons. So first of all, let's talk about the Callaway Apex DCB, the new release in the Callaway Apex range.
So the Callaway Apex DCB stands for Deep Cavity Back, and that basically means that this is going to appeal to a much wider area of golfers than what's previously imaginable with high handicap clubs. This club will provide the performance, feel and the launch of a forged player's iron, but because of that deep cavity back, you're still going to have that forgiveness for a high handicap player. It has an extremely wide sole, which means you have optimal turf interaction and pretty decent launch as well. Now, the whole Callaway Apex range has a new AI flash face cup, the first of its kind to be introduced into these irons, which means that for those off-center strikes, you should be getting some optimal launch and optimal distance with ball speed. So wherever you hit it across the face, you should be hitting it pretty straight, hopefully.
So the Callaway Apex DCB iron, the deep cavity back iron, arguably the most forgiving iron that Callaway will release this year. For me, I'm going to compare this a little bit to the Callaway B21 iron range, which again, I'm trying to look back at that and think, why have they released that if they're releasing this? It feels eerily similar, but there are a few differences. The first thing I notice is this actually isn't going as far as the Callaway B21 iron. I'll put the data up on the screen for you now. As you can see, I'm still averaging very good numbers, over 200 yards easy, around 215 yards, which is very good for a 6 iron. But what I felt is that this iron was consistent, so it went very, very straight. And what I was quite interested about is that for a game improvement iron, for an iron that has a very large sole, actually looking down at the club in comparison to other irons, such as the Callaway B21 iron, this doesn't look as bad. They've done quite well in terms of the redesign for this, and I understand that they don't need to really improve the previous Callaway Apex range that much, and it does look quite similar. I know this is a completely new design, the DCB, but it does remind me of previous models. But in terms of the actual performance that it's getting, it's going a long way, and that's what you would expect. But it's a weird one because you can't really expect anything too revolutionary with a game improvement iron like this, but it is a very, very good iron. It's similar to other irons that I've tested, but is it any different than other irons that I've tested? No. In terms of comparing it to, let's say, the Ping G425, this one feels a lot nicer, and that's expected as it is forged, but when comparing it to other forged irons, it feels, let's be blunt guys, it feels the same as other irons. So in terms of the price tag and everything else, it feels pretty similar, and there's no revolutionary technology that's been put into this that's going to make this go completely different to anything else. I feel like I should be quite honest with you guys, and this doesn't stand out from anything else. Still though, I do think this is a very good iron, but it's one of those things where if you are in the market for an iron, don't just limit yourself to one game improvement iron. Test it, test all the types of clubs that you can, and just see how you get on. It'll be interesting now to compare these numbers to the just standard Callaway Apex. So let's get right into the next model, the Callaway Apex iron.
So the actual Callaway Apex irons, there isn't too much difference between this and the deep cavity back. The deep cavity back obviously means that they have a wider sole and a bigger cavity, but apart from that, in terms of the technology, there's not too much difference here. It has the AI flash face cup as well, so you would expect some decent numbers in terms of the ball speed across the face and some forgiveness as well. But looking into this in terms of technology and stuff as well, they're pretty similar, which means that I think that these are kind of coming in as a pair for those combo sets, but in terms of numbers, I'm going to be interested to see how they're that different. So let's have a look how I got on at the swing suite.
Right, so that is the Callaway Apex iron, a continuation onto the previous models they've had. What do I think about this iron? Well, the difference between this and the Callaway Apex DCB iron for me, I feel like this is actually quite similar to the TaylorMade P790 in a way. It sounds strange maybe, because I feel like that's definitely more towards the mid to low handicap players club maybe, but for me, the one thing that I felt with this is that my consistency was there in a way, but there were a few shots whereby when you really hit it right in the middle, it flies. It really flies. So I'll put the data up for you on the screen now. As you can see, a little bit shorter than the just Apex DCB. One thing that I had is that this was going on occasions 230 yards when it would really fly. Maybe I would go a little bit, it wasn't even going left, it was just going straight in an absolute bullet. So bit of a tough one there, because I don't think that's a negative in any way, because a piece of a 90s had similar, and I didn't say that was a negative. But for me, it was strange for me to see that happening and then not happening with the DCB. So a bit weird, but if I were to compare this to the DCB, it's really tough for me to actually give an actual opinion, because I do, let's be honest, apart from the looks in which the DCB are obviously a little bit chunkier, they don't feel that different at all. It'll be something whereby I would say to you guys, if you are interested in trying either of them out, go down to your local fitter and try it. But if you want just a decent opinion from me, decent enough opinion from me right now, I would just say that the only difference is that the actual DCBs are probably a little bit more forgiving, in that obviously being a deep cavity back, you get a little bit more consistency there, a little bit more help to actually get it off the ground. If you are, let's say, that 30 handicapper or something, not the fastest swing speed, and you're just trying to really just get it straight, get it down the middle of the fairway, get it on the green, the DCBs are probably a bit more to your liking. With the DCBs as well, I don't necessarily think that they were ugly. So for me, it's strange, because I don't think there's that much difference between this and the DCB. I feel like iron ranges should have a large gap between them in each type of range. For example, the TaylorMades, the P7MC, P7MBs, they are, for me, they were very, very different. This is, so far, these don't feel that different, but I think the next jump, it really will be. So if you guys are in the market for trying, let's say, the Callaway Apex Irons, and you're that mid to high handicap player, I would try both of these out, because I don't think that they're really not that much different. So strange from me. But with those two game improvement iron sets done, let's now move on to some clubs that are a little bit more to the mid to low handicap players. Let's move on to the Callaway Apex Pro.
The Apex Pro 21 irons promote distance and forgiveness with the new AI flash phase, which means it's supposed to enhance that COR and also get really decent ball speeds. You have that really soft feel that you'd expect from a player's iron, but you also have 90 grams of tungsten for the longer irons, which means you should get some pretty decent launch angles and forgiveness for those long irons, but still have that workability for those short irons, which is a good thing that Callaway have introduced for these players' irons that are kind of targeted towards those scratch players, maybe single figure players as well, but you still have that added forgiveness with that tall cavity back on the club.
Alright then, so the Callaway Apex Pro, for me, just going on looks alone to begin with, this is an unbelievable improvement to their previous releases. The Callaway Apex Pro for me, I think they may have just changed the actual complete game plan here. It was more just a standard commercialized club, whereas this looks more like an actual MB club with the forgiveness of a CB club. So kind of ticks the boxes for me. I don't really know what to expect with this, because I wasn't really sure what they were actually targeting with this club, but the instant impact that I had from this in comparison to the Apex and the Apex DCB was very, very clear. This club was far more workable, and as well as that, you know when you were hitting it, let's say out of the toe or out of the heel, which is what you want from, let's say, a club that says pro in it, but I was still getting very, very good feedback in terms of my actual data on the screen. So I'll put the data up on the screen for you now, and this was with a 7 iron, so it wasn't the same as the 6 irons that I was getting before, and that is partly because the lofts are nowhere near as strong, but I was still getting very decent data, so around 185 yards for the 7 iron, which is still pretty decent for my numbers. But the main thing that I do want to just mention with this is the feel that I'm getting off this. For me, I think it's a massive improvement in terms of the actual Apex and the Apex DCB. That's not surprising at all, because this is obviously more towards the mid to low handicap players that said, you know what, let's dispel that. No, it's towards just the mid handicap players. I think it can be for everyone, because although you get feedback, although it is a small face, there is some forgiveness there. The sole isn't that of a muscle back iron, it is still somewhat forgiving, and you do have that tall cavity in the back. Similar to, let's say, the Strixon ZX7 iron, in that it still looks sleek, but you have some forgiveness here. And that's what I noticed with my data, that this was going pretty spot on around 185 yards. I was missing it a little bit left and right, but I was still getting pretty much exactly the same yardages. So that, for me, makes me think this is a perfect mid-handicapper's iron, because you still get the looks when I'm looking down at address. You can tell that there is, like, obviously some forgiveness there, but it looks like a player's iron. So for me, this is ticking all my boxes personally, because you're thinking, okay, this is one to keep an eye on. This is one that I know I can hit. I know I can be confident enough down at the ball to make a good swing at it. But even if I don't, it's still going to go a decent length, and I'm going to know where I went wrong. With the Apex and the Apex DCB, it's more towards those high handicap players, because you can be confident that it's going to go straight, more or less, whenever you hit it, but you're not going to really know what you did wrong, because you're not going to get that instant feedback that you get off a smaller face with less cavity in the back of it. So for me so far, the Apex Pro is the most impressive, because I feel like they've made a bigger jump in terms of their previous irons. The Apex and the Apex DCB, I feel that they are still good irons, but if I were to compare them to the previous releases, let's say you blindfolded me and I tried the Apex this year and the Apex 2 years ago, I honestly don't think I'd be able to tell a difference. And that's just me saying, because game improvements don't change that much. This one here, massive difference, because you can tell that they've really put a lot of effort into changing this one up, completely redesigning it and making it a club that not only is good looking, but that it appeals to everyone's game. So this one, Apex Pro, keep an eye on it if you are that mid-handicap range thinking of purchasing a new set that looks pretty and does the job. Now for the one that I'm actually the most interested in, let's move on to the one that is probably not for any golfer that's watching this video. This is the Callaway Apex MB, one that probably only tour players should use. I've actually previously used, and I had the Callaway Apex MBs from 2018 in a raw finish in my bag for about a year and a half. So I feel like I'm going to give a pretty good review on this, so stay tuned.
The Apex MB irons are a beautifully forged club in an extremely small club face. They are obviously for those tour players, people that are probably just scratching under, so if you are off 10 and thinking of getting these muscle back irons, do not do it. Trust us, don't do it. In terms of what's new with this iron and compared to the previous model, you can see they've got that changeable weight on the club head, which means that they have a lot of customization for the person's swing weight and just the overall optimization for this club. Apart from this, there's not too much difference, which is what you expect with a muscle back iron, but they do have high performance 20V grooves for a lot of spin for those short iron shots with the workability that you want as well. So not too much difference here, but luckily enough, I've got my hands on the 2018 model and I used them for a few years, so we're interested to see how these are different from the previous model.
Okay then, Callaway Apex MBs. The club that, I'm gonna be honest, the club that I was the most excited to hit out of this Callaway Apex range, just because I had these in the bag, the previous models, for a good 2 years. I got rid of them because I'm not good enough for blade irons. But I wanted to see how new technology and the kind of the redesign in which they put the tungsten weighting would affect this club. How can you really change a blade? Because it's a blade. There's no massive new technology in it because it's just so tiny. For me, there's a little bit of a difference here in that, again, similar to the Apex, I got a few ones that actually flew, really flew. So I was using a 7-iron, and I'm gonna put the data up on the screen for you now. And interestingly enough, very, very similar to the Apex Pro. So I was getting pretty much the same yardages for that. So not shy in distance, even though the lofts aren't as strong as other Apex models, but I was getting a very, very good yardage in terms of, for me, a 7-iron for a blade. I would probably expect it to go for about 178, 177. This was going a bit further, but I was getting a few that were jumping and going about 197. Again, I'll just say, in terms of comparing this to the Apex Pro, I felt a lot more feedback from this. I could tell instantly, within a millisecond, where this was going off the face. If I was hitting it thin, fat, whatever, I would know instantly, which for someone who wants to really improve their game, who is that mid to low handicap player, this is exactly what you want. But there was that added aspect of forgiveness. So although I knew that it was going at the toe, bladed it or whatever, my distance was still pretty decent in that it wasn't that much dispersion apart from the shots that were going absolutely crazy. So that was good for me, and it wasn't too harsh in terms of the actual feedback. What I really noticed with the old Callaway Apex MBs is that when you bladed it or when you hit it out the toe, it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun at all. I'd hit it out the toe and then I'd be disgusted with myself. It wasn't a pleasing feeling. I'd be there off the 6th tee at Knoll Park, hitting a 6-iron, chunking it without the toe, and it wasn't fun because you'd have that disgusting feeling that you get with the club saying, don't hit it there. Whereas with this, it wasn't actually as bad. I would hit it, I obviously knew when I was hitting it, but first of all, the results were good, and the actual feel that you would get wasn't as disheartening, let's say. So that could just be down to me in that the old irons that I had, I used so much that I just kind of went off them. But for me, I felt this was a bit of an improvement there, and as well as that, the actual design as well. For someone who loves blades like myself, and a lot of people who scour the internet looking for the best looking blades, this will be up there for 2021 because they've really done a nice job in terms of the finish. And although some people don't really like the tungsten weighting, which I completely understand, this is a very, very nice club. So for me, they have done a little bit of an improvement for the Callaway Apex MBs, but it's very tough to improve on the Callaway Apex MBs or any bladed iron because there's not mental technology that goes into it. So yeah, I'm impressed with this one, and for me it is enough of an improvement that I can give this one a pretty decent medal in our Golfmagic ratings, which let's get to right now.
Oh God, my knees. Right then, let's talk to the camera just a little bit about how I think these irons compare to the other irons that I've tested so far in 2021, 2020, and how they compare to the previous Apex line, because when you continue an iron range like Apex, a very successful iron range, you're always going to have pretty similar response in terms of feel, distance and everything, and it's more just like you're upgrading your old phone rather than just a completely new club being introduced that's going to actually feel completely different. So I do completely understand that, and that's why you shouldn't really expect anything absolutely mental. And for me, I'll say right now, if you have, let's say, the 2018 or a previous Callaway Apex range, I wouldn't take the plunge and purchase this new range just because it's new, because I don't feel like that there's anything that's too much difference. That's just for the Callaway Apex. If you are looking for a new iron set and you are that mid to high handicapper, I would definitely consider though the Callaway Apex and the Callaway Apex DCB, because for me, the fact that they are a forged club that produces exceptional distance and has very nice feel as well, it means that they do kind of tick all the boxes for something that I'd want, or something that I want to recommend a high handicap player, because they're a decent looking club. They're not too offensive from behind the ball as well, I feel that. And I'm going to be honest here, so Callaway, if you're watching, sorry, but the Callaway B21 irons were ugly. They were very, very ugly. I don't know what they were trying to do with that, but they just didn't look nice at all. They had too much going on. The Apex is always quite a classical line, and they've done quite well in continuing this with their new models. So if I were to recommend a game improvement iron set to any sort of high handicapper, the Apex and the Apex DCB would be the ones that I'd probably start with for Callaway. Oh, sorry, I'm just got to adjust my knees. I'm old. The next irons that I would say would obviously the Apex Pros is something that I would actually be the most impressed with, because again, what I just said at the start of this section of this video is that with an Apex line, they're not going to make that many differences. With this little one right here, I really feel like they have. In terms of, first of all, just design, they've really just made a massive redesign and made this something that any type of golfer could actually enjoy looking down at. The Apex Pros beforehand were completely different, and what they've done is make it more like, let's say, the TaylorMade P790. I'm sure they've taken a bit of inspiration from that. Again, Callaway, if you're watching, if you didn't do that, sorry, but the Callaway Apex Pros really do look like a player's iron, but have that added forgiveness there. And if you are to that mid handicap range and don't want a club that looks too chunky like the Callaway Apex, this club is the one to go for, because it has the looks there. It has that kind of looks that you would want to show off to your mates, but you'd still get that forgiveness and you still get that response if you hit a bad shot. So for me, if you are like off 20, I wouldn't go for these, because you don't want something that's gonna really hinder your game when you need all the help you can get. But if you are looking to make that step in getting that kind of workability and response, and to know when you're going wrong, these clubs are definitely one to try out. So if you are in that category, try these out at a local driving range when they come out. And the last ones are the Callaway Apex MBs. Now, I imagine not a lot of people are actually too interested in these, because a lot of golfers are more towards that mid to high handicap range. So if you are a mid to high handicapper and you're looking at these thinking, maybe I should get these, no. Thanks for watching, click another video. Don't look at these. These are very, very difficult to hit. And I, myself, a pretty decent player, I'm not going to put these in the bag or anything like that, because I've made that mistake before with the previous Apex MBs. And for amateur golfers, we're not playing for money, we're playing for enjoyment. But if you are that low handicap player, these are very hard to beat for a bladed iron, because they do perform impeccably. You get a lot of distance, you get a lot of workability, and in terms of the improvement to the previous model, the Apex MBs in 2018, this is a big improvement for me in a lot of areas. Obviously the design, and actually the distance as well. Forgiveness is another thing you really look for in blades, but they still provide a pretty decent bit of forgiveness. So for me, these and the Apex Pros were the highlights of this new Apex range. What I think you guys can do with this whole Callaway Apex range, and this is why I think Callaway have been really smart by releasing 5 models. Although I kind of criticised them a little bit at the start, saying that they're not too different, especially the Apex and the Apex DCB. What's coming more and more usual now in people's bags, especially amateur golfers, and what I'd always recommend, is combo sets, because they are something that really help your game in a lot of areas. For instance, I had the Callaway Apex MBs in 2018, but I only had them from 6 iron and upwards. In 4 and 5 iron, I had the Callaway X Forged, which obviously provide a lot more forgiveness. If you are that kind of mid to high, if you are a high handicapper, you can use the Callaway Apex and Apex DCBs, and then kind of have the DCBs as your 4, 5 and 6 iron, and then go and progress through to your shorter irons where you want that more workability and stuff like that. So that's why I would think combo sets, and why they've released 5 models, someone would say excessive amount, does work quite well, because you can mix and match. For me, as a low handicap golfer, what would I choose as a combo set? It's a great question. I should have thought about this before. For me, I would stay away from the Apex MBs until I got to the actual scoring irons. So I'd probably only have these in the 8, 9 and pitching wedge. Then I would go to the pros, these ones here, and have it in 7, 6 and 5 iron. And then finally for my 4 iron, I'd have probably the Apex DCB, the fattest of the lot. Why would I do that? I mean, why not? Because 4 iron you're usually going to use for finding fairways. You want it to be a club that you're just going to go pretty far and you're going to hit the fairway most of the time. Yes, there's going to be a few shots when you're 200, 230 yards out and want to try and hit the green, but it's still going to perform pretty well. So for me, if I had a dream set, that's probably what I would go for. And that's what I encourage you guys to go for if you are thinking of purchasing any of the Callaway Apex ranges, because it would do quite well. I'll put the prices of all of these on the screen now. Boop, 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 boop. So you can see pretty decent price, and for 2021, that's going to rival a lot of competitors. So for me, I'm going to have to give a rating now, aren't I? This is going to be tough. This is going to be a tough rating, and I'm going to, although I've done it previously in giving individual ratings for each iron set, I'm not going to do that because this is more of just a wholesome range. So I'm thinking, because of the Apex and the Apex DCB not being too different from each other, I think that's a negative. But I've kind of backed it up and said that, you know what, they've done that so that you can make pretty decent combo sets. And the way in which the actual Apex MB and the Apex Pro performed, you know what, Callaway, I'm going to give the Callaway Apex Irons a Golfmagic gold medal for 2021. I feel that they've done very well in providing a club and an iron set, an iron combo set for every single golfer that wants to just buy irons for 2021. And you have so many possibilities that you guys can do. And I just thought of it there for about 20 seconds and thought of a pretty nice combo set that I could put in my bag for this year. And you guys could do that too. And whatever handicap you guys are, you can make a very nice looking combo set. This kind of does a test to the whole release that Callaway have done this year, with the Epics as well, is that for me, it's not perfect, but it's going to appeal to a lot of golfers. So Callaway have been smart in this. I'm really interested to see what else they have to release in 2021. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video today. It was a lot of fun testing all 4 iron ranges, and although I'm now going to have to go and probably have a beer and go to bed because I've hit far too many golf balls, it's good to see the feedback that I've got from these irons and see that there has been a bit of an improvement to the previous Callaway Apex range that was a very strong set to be released. If you guys do enjoy videos like these, make sure you leave a like down below because it really helps myself, Golfmagic, and my boss. So leave a like and subscribe if you're new around here to keep up to date with all our equipment reviews, challenges, and much more to help you guys with your game going into 2021. If you want me to compare any of these 4 iron sets, any of these at all, to, let's say, compare the old Callaway Apex MB to the current Apex MB, let me know. I think it's probably better if I compare some game improvement irons to help you guys with your game, but let me know down in the comments and I'll get those scheduled very, very soon. I'll see you guys at the next video.